Welcome to Dude with a Cup of Wi-Fi, the show for the people, focusing on people in technology and looking at why they do what they do. I'm your host, James Gallardi, and joining me today is a special friend of the show, a man who needs no introduction, a man I like to say has the brain the size of a planet, Mr. Michael Boland. Michael, thanks for joining the show.
Hello, James.
So, Mike, thanks for coming on. The show is called Dude with a Cup of Wi-Fi, where we talk about technology over coffee. So we don't have our coffees now, so you want to grab a coffee?
Sure.
All right, let's go. And we're back. So, Mike, you've been in the technology industry for a very, very long time. Can you sort of describe your journey, where you started, and then take us through to where you are today?
Oh, yes. It's interesting, James, when you asked me that you wanted to talk about people, career, and history, I thought this question would come up. Look, I recounted it the other day. I've been in the industry, tech industry, my entire working life. I've worked for 40 years, and my progression started with an industrial year while I was at university in the technology part of the Department of Main Roads of New South Wales. And then when I graduated, I went out and worked. My first job was as a programmer in the liquor industry, working for 2 Years Limited. And I worked through the progression of that company's acquisitions and expansion across different divisions.
And you always stayed as a programmer throughout that time?
No, I started off as a programmer. I continued as a programmer through the entire time I was there. But what happened was we were acquiring more companies. There was a need to bring on communications across the companies and out to all the different divisions of warehouses and production facilities. And I started to be involved with that. I had a grounding in communications through my academic years, but now I get to apply it in practice. And of course, do understand we're talking about the evolution of computers from mainframes through distributed mini computers to desktop computers at the time. So I actually lived through that transition there and started to like two facets. I liked programming, of course. I liked networking. But I also was introduced to industrial networking there as well. And that came on later in my career. So I was there for a good 6.5 years and then moved on to a systems integration company, which was specifically a telecommunications networking company. And that company imported and was the franchisee for many a product that was sourced overseas into the Australian market. And I had experience of the entire diversity of everything from statistical multiplexers, which no longer exist, but largely as we moved into switches, routers, gateways, adapters, even in mainframe computing up in IBM world. After the integration business, it became obvious that I wanted to go deeper, and I joined Cisco Systems. So I was at that integration company for another 6.5 years, magic number, and then moved to Cisco, and I've been here for 26, right?
Oh, wow.
So inside Cisco, my career has started as Cisco was, and still is, a internet and large enterprise business. I worked on the larger complex customers, the telcos and the government customers, which were doing the most innovative, large and challenging pieces of business that we did at the time. And then as Cisco evolved, one thing for me has always been, I'm interested in pioneering. I'm interested in the new. And that's what attracted me to technology. And so I migrated. I put my hand up as Cisco was entering the service provider business, and I entered that. So again, it was that magic number, 6-something years working on enterprise and internet, and then worked in service provider for yet another magic number, 6 years. 666 seems to be the issue.
And so, well, depending on when you use that trilogy number.
Oh, whatever it is. But I continued on. So I think I put those demons to rest. So again, service provider business specializing in service provider access infrastructure, lawful interception, and then moved. Then when there were hundreds of people and large divisions inside Cisco working on service provider, well established, I decided that it was time to move on. And now I rebirthed back into that public sector experience that I had and started to pursue some of the vertical markets as Cisco was going in there. And that took me into healthcare. So I did a lot of work in healthcare inside Cisco, working on what is the proper networking architecture to support the health environment, specifically the large public sector health, but some private sector as well. Did a lot of work there. We won't go through the details. And then when there were more people, again, you can. It's just a repeat. When there were lots of people working in healthcare, and there were more challenges coming on, I decided to move on and looked at some of the things that interested me, which was facilities networking for the buildings themselves, getting above and beyond what is conventional IT into more of what makes the physical infrastructure work. So I did a fair bit of work there, and then that migrated me as Cisco evolved very quickly into industrial networking, which is where I am today.
Which is where you started, back at your old programming days.
So nothing ever goes away. It seems to come back.
Because the whole time I've known you, Michael, at my time at Cisco, the one thing that has always struck me is that you're always reinventing yourself, right? Like you said, you're always learning something new all the time, even with 40 years experience and so forth, right? Why is that important to you?
Oh, because again, it's reflecting on it. I think what I'm interested in is the challenge. What drives me is the excitement of solving the problem. I don't necessarily just think about technology problems. I like technologies. It's changed. It's fresh. Something's new happening all the time, and that's good. It's always good to learn. But what excites me most is when I can apply that technology to solve a business or organizational or a social outcome, and then come back and say, wow, look at that. I had an impact on that. It wasn't the technology per se. We didn't focus on it. That was just the craft of which I know, but how I could apply to that. And then the other side of that, the reflective side of that, was I really enjoy imparting knowledge to other people. It's maybe the teacher in me. Maybe the career for me in the end it might be to actually teach. But the goal is to impart knowledge. And I get that excitement in seeing in other people that which happens to me when I get that aha moment. Oh, it's no longer a forest. I can see the tree. I understand why now. And that's really good. I enjoy that tremendously.
So you started off as a programmer. I guess the question I have is, why did you not ever stay as a programmer?
Oh, because there was so much to learn in the industry which I was in. Telecommunications was always there, but it was a low layer thing. Everyone, I'll talk about that ISO model, the lowest layers, that's where the network layer lives. But so there was so much to learn and there's so much change. Just think about speeds and feeds and all the capabilities that we have today. We can run real-time systems where we couldn't before we built parallel networks. So there was so much change. It took nearly all my attention to actually get across that, right? And then as it evolved, what you're starting to see now is it's all coming back. The programmatic control of infrastructure, and I'm talking telecommunications infrastructure, but we see programmatic control of cars, Tesla. You get an upgrade, you park your car overnight, you'll get an upgrade. And what we're starting to see is all those things are now come back, but they come back in a new way. The programming that happens now is not the programming that I did before.
And what language were you programming back then?
Geez, I did everything. I did assembler. I did Cobolt for business, of course, Fortran. I did Algol.
Definitely old school.
Old school. Wow. But I tell you what, it makes you a better programmer. Resources were constrained. And the goal of just using your compiler or your programs development and IDEs on your PCs as a way of just churning commands and letting that assist you. It's good. It's a great productivity tool, but I believe it makes you a weak programmer, and you're not really having the good insight as what's required to say, well, do what I produce. Is it efficient? Is it the best it could be? Now, I do understand it's the challenge, working code, there's a saying, a working code is better than good documentation. I don't believe in that. I believe that both come together. But it's maybe the discipline I had where I had to start way, way, way back, even on hardware. And then as the software touched it, now we're more abstracted away.
Okay. So let's go even further back.
Oh my goodness.
Okay. Yeah, well, we're going back in time, baby. Let me tell you. All right. Get ready in that time machine, man. So why did you want to become a programmer? Like, what was the influence in your life going past that 40 years to say, I want to study this, I want to go into this field? Because at that time, 40, 50 years ago, the world is at your feet, essentially. You could do so many different things. Why did you choose to go down the technology path rather than, let's say, become a doctor, a lawyer, or perhaps, a cabinet maker or anything like that?
Oh, well, it's I'd love to say it's a great insight about what I wanted to do, but no. I would put it down to ignorance and luck, which is mostly what happens to most people at that time when you're at school and you're trying to work out, well, what am I going to do when I leave school? Do I go to university? Do I get a vocation, a career? What do I do? And I had not researched that well, and I don't think too many people do. And in the time, it wasn't one. People would talk about things in, there's science, there's accounting and finance. They would talk in those terms. Or vocation, do you want to be a plumber, or do you want to be an airline pilot? That we talked about the jobs rather than, well, what really are you good at and what interests you? In fact, the most important thing, where's the passion? Because the passion is going to get you through. So for me, it was ignorance. We came to the point and they said, well, you're going to go to university? Well, yes. Well, what do you want to do? I don't know. And what happened was at our school, now this is going back a long time, we had a programmable calculator. And I'm talking about something, it's a Canon, it was this big, it had Nixie tubes in it. You programmed it through a punch card system. And we did quadratic equations and whatever, the types of things you did when you were at senior school. And that fascinated me because that was a programmable device. Never seen something like that before. And of course, on the university application form, there's a thing that says information technology. And I went, yeah, I could do that. And I ticked other things as well. And the information technology was the first one to come back and offer me a position. Okay, so that's the ignorance part. Then once in it, I wrapped myself in it. I enjoyed it. It really, I really enjoyed it. And I don't know, was it the right job? In retrospect, I'm interested.
I think you've done pretty well for yourself.
I've done pretty well. So, but I must say, it's not. I'm not proud of the ignorance, but I think maybe fate has a part to play, and also you make the interest of what you do. For me, maybe it may not have mattered what role I went into. It would be the interest and challenge in that thing, that the career or that business or that problem solving might have just happened in another industry. But that's how it happened to me. Pure ignorance. Even went on, I even applied for a diploma, not a degree, because I, quite frankly, didn't know the difference between the two. And that's sad. But the good news was the university said, well, we only have like 4 people in the diploma thing, and we have like 200 people in the degree. Do you mind just switching over? It's all the same in the first year. And that's what happened. So meandered my way through. But I think what drives you is that guiding light. What challenges you, what makes you the moth to the flame thing, what makes you want to go to it that way. And I just pursued that, and that's where I am.
Did you have the challenge? The reason why I'm asking this question is because when I was at university, you look at job applications, back then, or even today in some respect, and there's job roles that are coming out for graduates, and a lot of the time it's that they need 2 to 3 years experience, sort of thing, and you get into this chicken and egg situation in a way. And the way I worked around that was internships, working at a number of different jobs part-time, outside of university. Was that something that happened to you in your later years at uni? Did you have those sort of opportunities or anything like that?
Well, yeah, I had part-time jobs.
In technology?
No. Part-time jobs are part-time jobs. Something to get some money in to help you along the way, and also to get you a break from the study. I must say, at university, I did extremely well. The first year was hard for me. When I said I was in there, and again, it wasn't necessarily something I pursued because of my capabilities. It was something just attracted me. And the first year in university it's usually a lot of catch up, getting you up to speed, your mathematics up to speed, getting you introduced to principles and functions you'd never seen before. But then they start right at the bottom. Well, they did then. I don't know now. And they started with hardware. They started with assembler level language, right? And I found that difficult because it was abstract. One of the things that I find very difficult, and I find this is bad when people try and explain something, is we'll dive straight into the abstract and we'll have no foundation for what it's about. At school, it's like, here's integration, here's differentiation. Just do this, you get this outcome, you get a tick.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until later someone says, oh, this is why we do it. This is how we can apply this mathematics to do something. Well, it was the same thing. We were in assembler and it was said, well, here's an instructions. You're loading the bottom so many bits for this, and this is the top register. Why is it 12 bits? Why are we doing this? That wasn't the point. So the first year, I was average. Then we did hardware. And we had to assemble computers from logic modules and build it. And it all clicked. It came into place why we were doing it. Okay, so now I just boomed from that point on, right? Okay, it all started to make sense for me. Unless I have a grounding in how you apply it, or does it have, I can't just work in the abstract by itself. That's just me. So all the way along, I've been attracted to solve the business problem. What is the business problem which I applied my craft to? And since the craft is changing tremendously fast, and the rate of change in organizations and business is changing, and then this echoes on itself. We'll introduce some capability, and then that creates a security problem, because in the past we talked about programmatic infrastructure. Well, that wasn't the problem when you had to physically hard code it. Well, it was not going to change unless someone broke in and started rewiring things. Now I can change via an API. So now it's another security problem. So then that presents a problem. So you did go down and deep dive inside there. So looking over this entire period, what's driven me has been the challenge of solving the ultimate problem through the technology and the craft that I do.
And then throughout your time within technology and your experience, was there a time where you thought things could shift to the left in technology, but then they shifted completely the other way, right?
Ooh. No, I don't think so. Not for me anyway. Why? Because things were powering along. When we first started, there were hundreds of different alternate systems, right? Ethernet was not dominant in the beginning. IP stacks weren't dominant. We even had OSI coming along as a standards model. We had XNS, we had IPX, Novell, we had Apollo Domain, you name it. Just like in the mini computers, there were hundreds and hundreds of mini computer companies. Then they all started to go away and migrate down. And that the evolution of more open systems and standardized systems like Unix and ultimately Linux coming into play with large commercial systems like Microsoft environments and whatever, Oracle and others. But you see this thing marching forward. But at the same time, the technology is moving on. We saw the demise of Token Ring from IBM as a standard. We saw Ethernet become the Borg of the telecommunications world, basically taking bits and pieces from different other systems, putting it together to make a better, and I'll use the Australian term mongrel, it's not a bad term, but basically a very resilient and flexible and powerful system moving forward. So the march moved forward. So I didn't necessarily see it took a left turn. I just saw it moving at a pace which was really hard to keep up with. What is more interesting is that other things are merging together.
Yeah.
So if I was to go back to those industrial systems in the past, they were all proprietary, built on proprietary hardware to a point, mainly proprietary software. We now look at them today, underlying maybe a VxWorks or a real-time Linux kernel, and then an operating system, an operating environment for doing the function it needs to do. They no longer use Fieldbus and proprietary extensions on serial protocols. They use IP stacks. So we've seen this convergence, right? For a while there, it looked like OSI, the world tried to go create a parallel, unique one. That wasn't the right way of doing it. And it quickly went away. We're well on that trail now. So I don't see anybody coming up and inventing something to replace TCP/IP. But that's why it's foundational, and it's evolving at an amazing pace unto itself.
And because if you look at the breadth of technology, you go from cloud, compute, networking, applications, everything's got its own domain, and that's really from a business standpoint. But then there's so many other aspects of technology, like from a consumer standpoint, right? From today with what we do. Looking down the line, is there anything that you're keeping your eye on today that you're like, oh, I wonder where this could go in the future?
Oh yeah, look, yeah. And
what are some of those things?
Oh, well, definitely the things, I think it's a confluence of different technologies that come in and change. We talked in my core craft about programmable infrastructure, basically putting the ability to have software-driven infrastructure. But if we now look at that world, we see the what's coming into this environment is the ability to someone to use a system. You were talking about the consumer environment. I want to be able to leverage it to provide input to it, but I don't need to be an expert in the underlying technology. Doesn't mean we don't need them. We need those people, right? And we need debugging and whatever. But you're starting to see other technologies coming. Artificial intelligence comes in, right? Artificial intelligence is coming in to be able to let us look at data and derive insight for optimization. We now apply that to programmable infrastructure. Now you're starting to come along and start saying, well, could I optimize this better? Could I make that a closed loop system? Right? Or could I get something different out of it? And then when we present with new problems, security is the internet's biggest challenge. Well, we now have AI to help us hunt down, at so-called light speed, the types of problems that are symptomatic of the very openness of the systems that we have. So the technologies are programmatic control of infrastructure, artificial intelligence migrating into that. And then I still go back that these are interesting underlying technologies. I really think the interesting component is also in the organizational business or organizational logic. We can now start to address problems in a different way.
Yeah.
So in healthcare, we would look and say, what if we changed the workflows? What happens if we could change the workflow supplemented by a technology that would let us change and create a better outcome, a better health outcome, right? Now that's powerful. So I think the real interesting encouragement for me is part in what it means to go to old problems and ask questions with a new light, given these underlying technologies. And of course, understand the technologies, how they apply, so that we actually have these working for us, not fighting us.
Yeah. Okay. So Mike, to wrap it up, we've got 3 fast-paced questions. All right. So I'm going to fire them at you rapid fire. And then basically you just tell me the first thing that comes to your head. All right. So what is your favorite film?
June.
June. Well, you must be enjoying when the new film comes out.
No, I didn't know there was one. I will be watching it. Very much.
Why June?
Oh, just a bit of a bit of sci-fi fantasy, but again, it had big moving ideas, right? The concept of something radical and new, a spice that would underlie the transport navigation through the universe, or wars of people trying to control that. The concept of a group that would evolve to try and make their planet better for water and also fight the oppressors. So it had everything in it for me.
What's your favorite book?
I've read many different books, but I'd actually say I'm a bit of a technology nerd. So
I would never have guessed that, Mike.
I like reading articles on technology. So while I do read fantasy, sci-fi, some real life history, I really like reading about technology.
Cool. So what are 3 things that you do on a daily basis that you believe are crucial to your success for the day?
Well, I think you have to have an inquiring mind. If you don't have the inquiring mind to say, what can I find out that's net new today? Right? Is there something that I can provide insight? And then can I impart that knowledge to someone else to help them in some way? Not being intrusive, but to come along and help them on their way. Those are the 2 big things for me. And then I think the other one is to unwind at the end of the day. I don't live this 24/7. Oh, my wife would say otherwise. But when I go home, I like unwinding, and I like just chilling out, watching some movies or something like that with my wife, and getting on. So awesome. It's that balance.
That's, as I said earlier, Mike, like the things that I've always admired about you has been that constant reinvention of yourself, the inquisitive mind that you have. There's not a day where I don't sit next to you and you ask me a question, I go, oh, gee, that's a good question, Mike. I don't know how to respond to that one. And thirdly, it's that teacher in you where you're imparting so much knowledge onto everyone else as well. It's been great. And so, you. Mike, thank you so much for coming on the show. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Look forward to having you on later on at another point in time. That is Dude with a Cup of Wi-Fi. I'm your host, James Gallardi. Make sure you like that video, hit that subscribe button, and you can find out more about people in technology, looking at why they do what they do. See you later.
Bye-bye.